Every single year, Adam Schefter releases the exact same list. His pre-deadline trade candidates list, compiled of a bunch of different executives like coaches, GMs, scouts, etc., on players that they believe can be moved before the trade deadline. Now, I'm in the camp of the Falcons, based off of their dominating victory on Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills, should be in the market to buy, not to sell. We'll explain a little bit later on in this episode. So I'll ask you the question before we get back into it. Should the Dirty Birds make a trade in 2025? That's fine. I want to start today's episode a little bit differently. We'll start with what we saw last night and why I believe it could mean the Falcons are already gearing up to make a trade. If you remember, we got the designation about 20 minutes prior to kickoff that Ray-Ray McCloud was inactive for the game. And I had said at the time, I said, this is very odd. I was even telling producer Reed, I was like, you don't have Darnell Mooney. You've got one certified wide receiver in Drake London and then kind of a hodgepodge of other catchers like Kyle Pitts and Casey Washington. So with no Darnell Mooney, why the healthy scratch for Ray-Ray McCloud? Because I went and looked up the injury designation. There was none. It was literally just a healthy scratch. They ruled him out. They said, yep, he's not dressing tonight. So in my years of watching football, and granted, I'm only 29, almost 30 years old, but I have been watching since I was 9, closely paying attention for basically my job since I was about 20, so about 9 years. Whenever I've seen a team give a healthy scratch to a player, when there's injury-prone or injury designations to the team already, and they still healthy scratch him, it usually indicates that they're gearing up to make a trade offer. And usually, they're trying to preserve the player, and with the Falcons' injuries so far, you can ostensibly think you don't want an injury to Ray-Ray McCloud if you were gearing up to trade him. So, if there was a trade, a wide receiver trade, what did Schefter have for his wide receiver trade targets? Well, I've got some bad news for you. 3 of these are a no-go already off the bat. Why? It's the New Orleans Aints. And do you think Mickey Boomis is going to make a call to Terry Fontenot and say, hey, let's talk some trade ideas? Hell no, of course not. That leaves 3 players on this list that you could potentially trade for. Tyler Lockett, Allen Lazard, and Jacoby Myers. Well, Allen Lazard blows and he's old. Tyler Lockett blows and he's old. So that leaves 1 player, Jacoby Myers, a player that is kind of old but definitely does not blow. And I wouldn't say he's old, right? He's 29, he's almost 30. But he is clearly the number 1 option right now for the Las Vegas Raiders. And with their dumpster fire of an organization, they're looking to sell as well, in my opinion. But I also believe that Jacoby Myers is not a true number 1. He's a really good number 2. So this season so far, kind of quiet in the touchdown categories, but 29 receptions. That's roughly 6 games played. A little over 4 receptions per game, 329 yards. He's a good player. A nice player. And with Darnell Mooney being as injured as he is, when he comes back, if Mooney or Jacoby Myers became your 3, that would be the most insane trio in the National Football League. Period. It just would. Drake London, Jacoby Myers, Darnell Mooney. Name me a trio better than that. I'll wait. So what are the pros about Jacoby Myers as a player? Because you can't just talk about getting the trade. What are you getting in a player? Well, he would be a true number 2 wide receiver. He's got surefire hands. Talked to Mitchell Renz, our Raiders host, and he basically said this is a guy that never drops the ball. If it hits his hands, he's catching it. He had 0 drops in 2024. I'm not entirely sure about 2025, but he's an NFL veteran with a ton of experience. He could fit right into any sort of system and be immediately productive. What are the cons? 29 years old, so he's no longer a spring chicken. So you've only got a couple more years out of him before you really start to see that production take a decline. He wants an expensive contract. There were rumors being floated out there that the number was around $23 million per year. He's not worth that. He's somewhere between $16 and $18 million, in my opinion. That sweet spot being about $17 million a year. And that leads into the last problem, not even necessarily about Jacoby Myers, but about the Falcons in general. They've got cap space issues. According to Over the Cap, which is the number one website to go check out all the different cap space situations in the NFL. I highly encourage you to look it up. It'll make you a smarter football fan. The Falcons only are projected, just a projection, to have $5 million in available cap space in 2026. So, long-term deal, unless you make another one, out the window. Or, if you let some other players go in free agency, maybe it works. But the question now becomes in my mind, is it just a rental? Would you be renting Jakobi Meyers for a year, for the rest of this year, and then sign him to a one-year deal worth $18 million when you get, I'll say, any number of Falcons players that leave for free agency, because it happens every single year. So if you cleared up enough to give one more big contract like there, a one-year prove-it deal, could you sign the likes of a Jakobi Meyers to pair with Drake London and Darnell Mooney? And I know you're wondering, why does Ray-Ray McCloud come into this whole thing? Why'd you start with him? Because in my trade package, I gave what I believe would be the proper amount of compensation. I talked to Mitchell Renz. I said, what would the Raiders want? He said a third-round pick. And I said, nope, too expensive. But how about this? How about a fourth-round pick and Ray-Ray McCloud? So you're getting a very kind of low-end number 3 in Ray-Ray and a fourth for the Raiders. And you get Jakobi Meyers and a 2026 seventh-round pick. So you get another draft pick back. Granted, it's a seventh-round pick, but you get a much better wide receiver. Now, why would the Raiders make this deal? Well, it gets Jakobi off their books, so they don't have to pay him. They get a fourth-round pick. They're already in rebuild mode, and they get a guy that plays primarily out of the slot like Ray-Ray does. Well, Jakobi Meyers is their primary slot receiver. So it's a win-win-win, in my case, for everybody. We get the receiver that we so rightly deserve. They get draft compensation and, albeit worse, replacement. But you let me know if you would make this trade offer. Yes or no? Would you accept it? If you are Terry Fontenot, do you say, yes, I accept, or nah, I'm going to explore elsewhere? All right, coming up. This should be like the last time we talk about it. But Schefter did list Kirk Cousins as a trade target. In fact, he was the lone quarterback on this trade list. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I believe is happening to Kirk Cousins and why I believe a trade is as far back now than it ever has been. Before I do that, I have to tell you about my friends over at Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, you can actually get paid to be right. Do not miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. You now can follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in just one click, whether it is a friend, a celebrity partner like producer Reed, or just someone whose picks you like. Hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on Prize Picks. How does it work? Well, you just pick the player, you pick the more or the less, and then you watch your money multiply up to 2,000 times your money, to be exact. Just download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It is good to be right. So let's talk a little bit about Kirk Cousins. And he was the only quarterback that was listed as a trade candidate. Now, we know this to be a fact, that quarterback is the highest commodity position in the NFL. So while he might only be the only quarterback listed, there are plenty of other quarterbacks that could get moved. Will Levis is a name that could get moved. I mean, there are tons of guys that you could end up moving that are just solidified backups. Look at Kenny Pickett. He was moved before Kirk Cousins was. But Adam Schefter echoed kind of what I believe about the trade deadline. And here's another reason why I don't think Kirk Cousins getting moved makes sense. The teams that are winning want to bolster their rosters and their chances of making an extended playoff run. The teams that aren't winning are willing to begin looking ahead to next season and stockpiling draft picks to help replenish their roster. It's hard to imagine that any NFL team could make a significant move ahead of the deadline, but general managers are lighting up phone lines, digging into the available players, willing to make their next move, and waiting to make their next move, So a couple things in there. First of all, doesn't it sound like a Kirk Cousins trade would be a pretty significant move. I think so. He's the best backup in the league and probably right now at this point in his career, a middle-tier bridge quarterback. He can absolutely start and win games for you. There's no doubt about that. And if there are some quarterback-needy teams out there, the Minnesota Vikings, just heard from our Vikings host today, Carson Wentz is now dealing with another injury. So J.J. McCarthy is injured, and Carson Wentz is injured. I mean, it's just nonstop injuries over there in Minnesota. The Jets don't necessarily have an injury, but Justin Fields sucks. Las Vegas Raiders, Geno Smith has been the most turnover-prone quarterback, so they could be looking for another replacement. The Arizona Cardinals, by the way, I know who have Kyler Murray, but could be looking off to move off of him in the near future, given their recent woes. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have Aaron Rodgers, but is most likely, in my opinion, retiring after this season. So, are any of these practical trades? No, they're not. Not one of these makes sense for right now. The Vikings still have J.J. McCarthy when he comes back to being healthy. The Jets have Justin Fields under contract. The Las Vegas Raiders have Geno Smith under contract that they can't really get out of. And the Cardinals, massive contract to Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers. They're going to ride right now with him. So none of this really makes sense for a 2025 season perspective. Now, could the Steelers call them up and say, hey, Aaron's thinking about retiring. We want a nice contingency plan. We'll give you this X amount of dollars for Kirk Cousins. Sure, it's fine. But at this point, I'm totally fine with Kirk as my backup. I'm tired of hearing about all of the Kirk Cousins trade rumors. It's been something that we have explored far too frequently on this channel. And to be completely honest, until we get a bigger news nugget, a bigger rumor nugget where someone says, hey, this is actually in the works, I don't want to explore it. Kirk's a backup. He's $27.5 million. There's not a GM in the world right now that is willing to take that on as a full head for Kirk Cousins. So if you're tired of the Kirk Cousins trade rumors, type your T's for tired or your E for engaged. If you're still like, hey, I love hearing about it, then type your E's. But if you were asking Moose as a fan, I'm typing my T's for tired because at this point, like I said, Kirk's my backup and that's all that there is to it. Remember to subscribe to the Falcons Today channel. We are trying to grow up to 43,000 subscribers. We've already had over 900 in the last 24 hours, which is sensational. So do me a favor, hit that sub button, like today's video, and be cool.